Good evening and welcome. This is Newsfirst Review 360 with me, Ramesh Irugalbanda. Well, we received a bit of a respite after the inclement weather conditions that battered the island. However, the flash floods that affected Colombo and its suburbs have been estimated to cost between 1.5 and 2 billion US dollars in the minimum. Finance Minister Ravi Karunanayake was quoted by foreign media reports as stating that insurance claims from households and small businesses may reach 5 billion rupees. Let's take a look.
Low-lying Colombo suburbs succumbed to torrential rains and water overflowing from the Kalani River, destroying homes and businesses. According to Minister Ravi Karunanayake, reconstruction could cost nearly 2 billion US dollars. Minister Karunanayake said flood and landslide victims could submit claims to the Disaster Management Centre under a government policy that compensates uninsured victims. The policy would compensate victims with a limit of 10 billion rupees of claims in total.
We have insured for 10 billion rupees. This is for houses of individuals. We have already spent 300 million rupees on a premium from the budget and another 220 million rupees has been paid. We have paid more this time as a security cover. Today we can realize its value. This is an insurance cover for a national disaster.
Cautious on the United Kingdom's EU referendum, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is bracing himself to present a 4-year development plan for Sri Lanka.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, addressing the gathering, said government action during the last few months managed to keep a serious financial crisis at bay.
In another month or so, the government will put out its 4-year development strategy. We are working on that. We spent 1 year or nearly a year or more stabilizing the economy, ensuring for us that despite the global downturn, we will not face a serious financial crisis.
Premier Wickremesinghe is confident that Sri Lanka could move forward with development plans provided there is no major jolts in the global economy.
In 2015 and 16, we presented a budget. After we presented the budget, in the belief that the global economy will improve, it went the other way around. There were many false starts. There have been many predictions. But we are confident now the global economy will sustain itself. The only question being the outcome of the UK referendum on the EU on June 23rd. If that is a positive outcome, and we all hope it is for the sake of the world, then we could ensure that the strategy we followed will bear fruit.
We asked academics and economists of what they would like to see in the Premier's 4-year development plan.
So the Prime Minister's expected speech on the development plan should, I think, bring forth more plans to execute some of the things that they've been talking about. So last year as well, in November, he presented this 5-year plan. But what you need to now see is the reforms are clear what they need to do, more on the execution side of things, how they plan to implement it, how using the stability, macro stability from the IMF program, how that will play into the whole thing, and also encourage investors, especially FDI investors, and what they hope to do it in that respect. So I think more in terms of how they, in the next 4 years, plan to tackle the execution process of it.
We need to have a consistent tax policy, and particularly more taxes on direct and less indirect taxes. Third, in fact, I believe that the infrastructure development should be continued, and which areas we are focusing is the issue. And fourth, of course, we know ultimately the development will depend on the entrepreneurship. How many people will convert into entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka? At the moment, out of the total population, about 4% of people are the real business owners. So how can we increase this number of business owners from 4% to say 20%, 25%? So we have to focus in small and medium-sized enterprise sector, and that sector we need to look after and provide all the necessary facilities, and we need to encourage them through particularly providing the financial literacy.
Sri Lanka to tap foresight tools and innovation in national plan.
The government is tapping scientific forecast tools in national planning in a bid to make Sri Lanka an open and competitive economy in South Asia. State Minister of National Policies and Economic Affairs Niroshan Pereira said constraints blocking national development could be addressed by the use of foresight and innovation.
Today we face numerous global complexities that directly impact us as a small developing country. Trade patterns are rapidly evolving due to formation of multilateral, bilateral and regional treaties. Financial markets and currencies fluctuate on a daily basis. Political dimensions are reshaped by new ideologies, and most importantly, civil conflicts have engulfed the world. Added to these complexities are the local constraints we face. After battling a civil war with human and economic casualties, we have been forced to deal with an economy that is immersed in debt. Ethnic and social issues are yet to be solved with a consensus. Adverse climatic conditions have challenged the core of our existence. In overcoming these challenges, foresight and innovation can be used as an effective tools in policy formulation.
The United Nations Development Programme said foresight and innovation are increasingly becoming tools that governments use in development projects.
Foresight is a methodology that encourages innovation, strategic planning, and the proactive shaping of the future. The purpose of foresight is to enhance the ability of decision makers to engage with and shape future events. Foresight is about anticipating possible and probable future events in order to cope with, adapt to, or transform these events. Where traditional planning has sought to prevent failure, foresight prioritizes resilience, namely early detection and fast recovery.
UNDP said foresight will help developing nations to anticipate the future and possible outcomes of action.
Rather than making predictions on the extrapolation of current trends or the frequency of similar past events, foresight cultivates the capacity to anticipate alternative futures and the ability to visualize multiple possible outcomes and their consequences. So foresight can help policymakers identify opportunities and threats that may arise over the coming years, as well as possible strategies to deal with them.
How significant is President Maithripala Sirisena's attendance at the G7 meeting? We have the details from Japan coming up right after this commercial break. Welcome back. You're watching Newsfirst Review 360. Now, the G7 summit is a gathering of the world's most powerful industrialized nations. President Maithripala Sirisena is incidentally in Japan to attend the G7 summit following an invitation extended by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Now, does this invitation mean that Sri Lanka is finally beginning to regain its position in the international arena? Let's take a look.
President Maithripala Sirisena kicked off Sri Lanka's first ever rendezvous with the powerful G7 group, pushing Sri Lanka's international profile a few notches up. The historic occasion has allowed President Sirisena to engage with G7 leaders during a session titled Stability and Prosperity in Asia. Japan, the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Canada make up the G7 along with the EU and the European Commission. We asked the private sector how they view President Maithripala Sirisena's participation at the G7 summit.
I see it as a very, very powerful message. How many people do get invited for a G7 meeting to sit next to some of the most powerful nations who are believers in Sri Lanka? I mean, it's a giving blessing for us, saying we believe in you, we trust in you. You have come together as parties and you have put a vision together. Now, we need to strengthen that vision, because this opportunity of a national government, I still haven't seen the fruits of it. But it's a huge opportunity for not only for the G7, but for us as Sri Lankans. We are looking, I am also waiting to see, come up with this development plan. President and the Prime Minister came together from two different parties with different difficult conditions. We have to commend them for both of them for that. They have to hold hands for next 5 years without political deterrence locally. Then we will probably able to go hand in hand for some change over 5 years. If we achieve a certain change within the next 5 years, it would be difficult for somebody to reverse it.
So the G7 meeting is very significant because it shows that we have retouched again the relationships with these developed nations as well. What I hope it will transform into is more trade agreements and things like investments coming through now that we've got that position in terms of global space. So what I hope it will translate into is that without it just being another meeting or conference.
And it's time now for Biz First Briefing, a special segment featuring other local stories that occurred this week. Views on the health of the Sri Lankan economy coming up right after this short commercial break. Welcome back. You are watching Biz First Review 360. Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe spelled out his vision for Sri Lanka's economy at the 2030 Now Foresight and Innovation Summit organised by the Ministry of National Policies and Economic Affairs together with the UNDP. Here are some of the highlights of the event.
Sri Lanka has to rely on itself. We have to innovate. We have always been a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. What is the Indian Ocean? It was for a long time the richest trading region in the world. And it will become one of the fastest growing regions in the world in the coming 30, 40 years or the next 3-4 decades. That is unavoidable. Just from in South Asia and the Southeast Asian countries which border the Bay of Bengal, you will have a population of well over 2 billion. If you take the whole Indian Ocean, it will be virtually over 3 billion people, 3.5 billion. And countries which are fast growing, which in economic terms will soon become middle income countries. We are situated in the middle of the Indian Ocean, where the main shipping routes of the world go across us. Now, what we have to do is to innovate and make use of our location for our development. Trading in the world today is a bit more complicated than the old days, when the Silk Route just went through numerous countries, paying tolls and dues for goods that certainly were not competitive. Today you have a global competitive markets. So if you are to go across, if you are to create the markets, first move in and ensure that you have sufficient number of free trade agreements which enable you to deal with a large number of countries. So we are looking at our economic cooperation and trade cooperation stretching from the EU up to Japan and Korea, to East Asia. That's what we are handling now. With India, with China, with Singapore, with Japan, and many of our other partners, friendly countries around Sri Lanka. Next, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. We have with our South Asian countries, and also with Korea. It still leaves for us to have an agreement with the United States, which, as we all know, can only be decided after November 2016. Take the Western province and turn it into a megapolis, a large city in the middle of the Indian Ocean. But there are many issues to be resolved, as last week showed us. Flooding, all most of them are man-made. Still, going by our visions, going by our goals, the megapolis must not only be the largest city in the Indian Ocean, it must rank high in the, it must certainly rank high in its achievements on sustainable development. We want a livable city, because in South Asia, cities are no longer livable. How do we plan that out? This is the first thing we set out. So again, you come back to sustainable development, the environment, the energy. If you have this one single city in the middle of the Indian Ocean, after all, that's what history taught us long ago, when Anuradhapura and Polonnaru were the larger cities in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's from here that we start. We look at our opportunities now of develop the south, of Hambantota, of industrialization, again within the goals of sustainable development and protecting your environment. You cannot forget the countryside. You cannot forget the rural economy. After all, you have to feed people. There will be more mouths to feed in 2050 than you will have today. Then from subsistence agriculture, you have to look at those crops where you are in a position to supply to the region. We may not be self-sufficient in every crop. I don't think so. But certainly you can be exporters of some of the food crops or some of the items. How do you modernize your rural economy? After all, Sri Lanka is not such a large country. If you will have the western province as a megapolis, within 50 to 60 miles of the western province, the suburban and the rural areas. Around Kandy, there will be a large number of suburban and rural areas. Around Hambantota, around Trincomalee. Then many people ask, what is the government doing? You are national government. You got used to a era where you came up with large projects, and that was promoted over the media. So we had media growth, media development, and really in between. And of ministries competing with each other. That's what we had got used to. But that's something we want to depart from. When national government comes in and all the parties come together, then we must have a program which will be accepted not merely by the main parties in the government, but is based on a consensus. So we've just been able in the last, by end of April, to put together the package of economic stability. Now we can go ahead on economic development.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. If you missed out on any of the segments that we aired tonight or the previous weeks, you can simply log on to Newsfirst.lk/YouTube or follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/BizFirstReview360. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Ramesh Bandara wishing you a pleasant weekend ahead.